I'm Colonel Dave Gray. I'm the Executive Director here at the Center for Leadership and Ethics, and I want to welcome you to the first in our annual series of Courageous Leader Speakers. Now, every year, the Center chooses a theme to guide its programming throughout the year. This year, our theme is American Values. Now, as we think, today is the 10th of September. Tomorrow, amazingly, is the 24th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on the United States on the 11th of September, 2001. For those of you, a few of you, who are over the age of 35 in the crowd, you're going to remember exactly where you were when you heard the news or saw it on TV, what you were doing, and you're going to remember the initial shock. First, that maybe it was just a small plane that some knucklehead was flying in restricted airspace. But later on, recognizing that this was something more devious. I was the operations officer, or G3 for the 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum, New York at that time. Had just returned from PT, was getting ready to go back to work when the second plane hit. And it was at that time, roughly 5 minutes later, when I got a call from the commanding general saying, I need you to come back in as soon as possible because we're going to start dealing with the situation. So that second plane hit at the World Trade Center made me recognize that the world had changed in just an instant. And the basic theme tonight is, do you remember? Many of you don't. But for those of us who do remember, it's important that we talk about those American values. And the experiences of tonight's speaker underscores the American values displayed on 9/11 and the response that quickly followed. America's response was very swift, with special forces deploying into Afghanistan within a month. And then we're on the ground by mid-October to chase down bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda thugs. Now tonight, we welcome Master Sergeant Retired Christopher C. Spence, a 25-year Army veteran who served 17 of those years exclusively in the United States Special Forces. During his time with 5th Special Forces Group, which was the first Army forces in the theater, he deployed numerous times, not only in Afghanistan, but throughout the Middle East. He was part of that first wave that went into Uzbekistan and then into Afghanistan in response to 9/11. He also completed 3 combat tours in Iraq. And lastly, he was a lead facilitator in the first expansion of the Special Forces during the global war of terrorism to enhance capabilities for the first time in 20 years. Now, during the expansion, Master Sergeant Spence was responsible for the manning, equipping, budgeting, and training of a new battalion that became the model for the expansion for several other Special Forces battalions needed during the global war on terrorism. Master Sergeant Spence took the first pictures of the American Special Forces in northern Afghanistan. Those pictures of an ODA, Operational Detachment Alpha Team, riding on horseback alongside their Afghan counterparts. Perhaps his signature shot is the close-up of the horse soldiers. which is currently on display in the Smithsonian Institution and served as a template for America's response monument, or the horse soldier statue, which overlooks the 9/11 memorial in New York City. We're very fortunate to have Master Sergeant Spence with us on this eve of 9/11 to give us some insight into the planning and execution by our special forces on the ground in Afghanistan during that crucial time. Please join me in welcoming Master Sergeant Chris Spence.
Luckily, I was a combo guy, so I was able to figure that out. All right, thank you for the invitation to come speak in front of all of you tonight. Deeply honored. Never been to VMI before, so it was very nice for the hospitality I received today. Got a nice tour of the Institute here. Love what all you guys are doing here, and just nice to be part of this whole program. So what I'd like to walk everyone through tonight is my experience and what we went through during 9/11, and then how we ran through that, went to Afghanistan, and the outcomes of that. So the first picture you're going to see is sometimes a story has already started to be written before you even know that you're involved. Here's Odie B. 580 from 3rd Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group, standing in front of the Twin Towers in June of 2001 from Ellis Island. We were the color guard that was picked to come do an, every year from Ellis Island there is a American immigrant celebration that's done there. We were the color guard. None of us knew in 3 short months that the Twin Towers would fall. And to give you a snapshot of the individuals in this photo, this is just a random
12 soldiers out of Bravo 3rd Battalion, Special Forces Group.
Everybody hear me?
Mark Mitchell, our company commander, won the
Distinguished Service Cross at the Battle of Quali Jane.
Chris Lifesay lost his leg
During
during the invasion of Iraq. Ben Stevenson
Was killed in action during his
probably his 5th tour in Afghanistan, working with another
Special
special.
Operations Unit. That's me with darker hair.
The only person
This entire picture was
was not affected by 9/11 was Wayne Owen.
He was PCS before Bragg.
Not in August. So,
12 guys there,
11, all 11 people
there, deployed to both Afghanistan.
Afghanistan and to Iraq. So that's the enormity of what affected us on that single day. As we know, we just saw the Twin Towers were hit. 3 or 4 from the colonel just said, this was our
JFK moment for my generation. Before that, it was the Space Shuttle Challenger.
exploded. We all watched that not in real time. They pushed the TV sets into our classrooms and showed it to us. That was the first time in my history
Growing up, that we saw something.
as was actually happening. From my parents' generation, when JFK was assassinated, my parents
Still remember where they
were to this day. For their parents, it was when Pearl Harbor
was attacked. Those are the seminal moments in our lives that either divided or brought this country together. All of those moments have brought this country together.
and 9/11
Was mine.
What I would encourage
All of you to do this weekend or during the rest of the course week
ask your instructors where they were.
when the Twin Towers fell. You'll get
A
a
lot
lot
of funny stories.
of crazy stories. And if you have a chance to speak to your parents on the weekend, ask them where they were at. Raising the first flag over
World Trade Center, showing America was
not going to lay down quietly.
we would rebuild and stand back up, what American spirit does. So,
Over Columbus,
Columbus Day weekend, Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group said, hey, you're going to K2. We were originally
scheduled to go
to Kuwait
as part of some
the pre-deployment, but due
9/11,
we canceled and redirected to K2.
over Columbus Day
Weekend, They said, hey, we know we told you
it's going to be 4 more days before you deploy, but that just changed. So pack up the rest of your stuff, get on this plane, and we ended up in K2. Now, as you know, the military loves acronyms. And no one could say Conibad, so we turned that into K2. I'll just hold it. Is that better? Yes. All right. Don't sound like a transformer? Okay, so we loaded up on a plane. We flew to K2, Karshi Conibad. That lasted about 5 minutes, and then it became K2. When we first got there, what our goal was to set up tents and set up the isolation facility, is what Special Forces soldiers then go through before they deploy in country. They go through a 96-hour planning process before they deploy in country. So this is K2. This is, we arrived on the 9th of October. This is the 30th of October, and we experienced our first rainstorm, and it flooded the entire place. This is an old Soviet airbase that had not been occupied in a number of years. And as you can see, it turned into a muddy mess. This is what our walk paths look like. Basically, we had RFED tents, and that was our living quarters. This is the B team. This is the B team operations center right here, and all these tents here are living quarters and planning cells for the ODAs. Luckily, when they sent water bottles to us, they brought them in these little blue canisters, so we were able to walk ways over all the mud. Similar to what happened in World War I on the Marne. All right, 2 November comes around. My sergeant major comes up to me on the 30th of October, 31st, and says, hey, pack your bags, we're going in as part of ODC 5-3. I'm like, what's an ODC? Because I never briefed that. And an ODC is an operational detachment charter. It's a command and control element that had not been used since Vietnam. And what these cells were command leadership with communications and medical training to advise these Northern Alliance senior commanders. And our senior commander was General Dostum. To give you some perspective, this is K2, this is Mazar-e Sharif, and this is where we landed by helicopter on the 2nd of November at LZ Burrow. And this is what LZ Burrow looked like. So we came in via helicopter, and we landed right down there. And you can see there's a couple tents there. That's where Dostum's base headquarters was at. But when we landed on site, so we had to wait a couple of hours for him to return. This is General Dostum on his white horse. He's got a sleeping blanket and he's got a pillow because all the saddles in Afghanistan are made. Do we have any horse in the crowd? Yeah, what do you think a wooden saddle would do to your backside? Exactly. We also lived in a cave. Who's seen 12 Strong? All right. That cave that they depicted in the film, that was like the Ritz-Carlton of caves. This is more like the Motel 6. Now, in Afghanistan, horses are more valuable than people. So during the wintertime, all the horses were stored in the caves. Why did they store the horses in the caves? Because it kept them warm. So what do you think the cave smelled like? Exactly. So being dumb Americans, we stayed in the cave too. It just smelled funny. And as you can tell, all right, I'm going to turn this, what is it? All right, there we go. As you can see, we have our Army water can, cooking utensils, and candles. This is the picture I took on our first day there. General Dostum wanted to gather our battalion commander with several other folks, and wanted to take basically a frontline trace when the commander walks his soldiers along the line to show him where all the positions are at. I had driven ahead of them on a John Deere Gator. We brought 2 John Deere Gators with us into theater because there was a transportation problem, and Steve Bly from ODA 595 were on that. And I told Steve, stop the Gator. I said, I've got to get a picture of this because no one is going to believe this. Here we are in the 21st century riding horseback. And so we took this picture and sent it back to headquarters. The next group was we had a group of the horse soldiers coming by, and this is Bart Decker. This is the picture that was used as the template for the horse soldier statue. Is this an Army guy? He's actually Air Force. So the template for the horse soldier statue is actually an Air Force STS airman. So this is Mark Nooch, the team leader from ODA 595. I said, please don't smile. As you can see, he paid attention. This is who Thor portrayed in the movie 12 Strong. See the resemblance? Now you can also notice the little flowers on the horses. The Afghans treated their horses like cars, right? They would decorate them, take care of them. They would also do the same thing with their AK-47s, which were basically family heirlooms, which were passed down from generation to generation from when the Soviets invaded. This is your average Afghanistan village. What do you not see there? You don't see any electricity. DoorDash doesn't deliver there. And they don't even have a car to sit around and watch rust. There's a central well in the middle of the town, few trees, all mud huts. This is basically every village you're going to find out in Afghanistan. So for all of us coming from the modern society that we live in to basically biblical times, it was kind of surreal. This is our Major Mario Vigil. There's a good story behind this. We had just spent all day riding horseback up to this old fortified position on top of a hilltop. So I get off my horse. Everybody else gets off their horse. I'm getting my stuff. And this Afghani freedom fighter walks up to me and goes, mine. And he points to my horse. I'm like, all right, give me a minute. I'll give you your horse back. I got it. And then he goes, no, mine. I'm like, I got it. It's your horse. I'll give you your horse back. And then he points to my Gore-Tex jacket, which is lying on the ground. And he goes, no, mine. I'm like, no, that's my Gore-Tex jacket. And then finally he goes, Kambula. As we all know, that means explosives. So I'm in a minefield. So language barriers do have a problem. So my buddy, Paul Beck, goes, hey, since you're in the minefield, can you hand me my stuff? So luckily I was able to get out of the minefield. And we soon learned we don't really get off the paths because the Afghans have cleared most of the paths from the mines. Because during the Soviet War, the Spetsnaz, when they used to come and attack the Afghan villages, they would land helicopters on the top of the hills. So the Muj, or the Mujahideen, would put landmines in all the hilltops. So when the helicopters would land and the Spetsnaz would jump out of the helicopters, they would jump into a minefield. Okay, during the movie you heard General Dostum say, you Americans move too slow, correct? Well, guess what he did here? He abandoned us on a hilltop. And so we, who moved too slow, look at the size of our rucksacks, moved too slow. So we had to rent donkeys to get ourselves off that hilltop. Since there's no Enterprise or Alamo, we had to find an Afghani willing to sell us or rent us donkeys. How much do you think those donkeys cost to rent? They were $100 a piece. And do you know why they were $100 a piece? Because we only brought $100 bills into the country. So when you only have $100 bills, everything costs $100. So we basically screwed the entire economy for about a month until we said, look, not everything costs $100 and we will take change. So we loaded up now, as you will learn when you're in the military, whenever you give money to a civilian, they have to sign for it. Because you have to count for that money that's been expended. But we're currently in one of the most uneducated countries in the world, and we have to have this guy give us his signature, which he didn't have. So in the movies, he put X marks the spot, and that was good. So that actually does happen. And we then walked 11 kilometers in the middle of the night down one of the most land-ridden places in the world without any issues. Also, when we rode horseback, to get back to that, how do you tell a horse to stop? Well, that's great for American horses. These are Afghani horses, and they don't speak English. So all that John Wayne stuff we learned did not work. So we went to our interpreter, whose name was Lakai, and we're like, hey, how do you tell a horse to stop? As long as we can say stop, we're good. And the term is dur. So as long as we can say dur, we could get our horses to stop. Mr. Scorantino right there, another Air Force STS guy, had never ridden before. And they put him on the most obnoxious horse out of Dostum's whole group. His horse would routinely get mad, break ranks, and run off. So here's poor Scorantino on this galloping mountain pony going down. So we basically said, look, steer him uphill, the horse will get tired, and we'll get you back in formation. During some of our rides at night through the Afghan mountains, as Dostum led us from point to point to point, we were going through these deep valleys in the middle of the night so the Taliban couldn't see us. Some of the paths that we would actually ride on were about 1 foot to 1.5 foot wide. And it was all rock in mountains. And if you looked down to your right or left, depending on what side of the crevasse you were on, you couldn't even see the bottom of the crevasse. They were so deep. So basically, we would sit in our saddles with 1 foot out of the holster on the fall side, and then hope if our horse did slip, we'd have a 50-50 chance to get our other foot out of the holster to fall on the high side and not roll into the crevasse. Because we would have fallen in there, nobody would have known until the next morning. High adventure. This is Shebregon, as we went from village to village. Once again, your average town out in the middle of nowhere. Average farming implements. Some of you guys may have seen this in a museum before, but this is how they were still operating in 2001. In the movie, you see them break through that big Bog Valley Pass, right? This is the Bog Valley Pass that we broke through in the movie with the big rocket attack and stuff. We pushed through there. That's lead elements of Dostum's forces going in to help secure Mazar-i-Sharif from the liberation. This is your average truck. Once we got off horseback, we got in trucks. When we did that nice little walk off the mountain with the donkeys, they threw us in the back of this truck with about 50 separate freedom fighters. And if you notice all those boxes on the signs, that's all ammunition. So we're sitting in a truck full of ammunition and a chicken that was running around in the bottom of that truck. And as we were driving through in the middle of the night, our interpreter would readily say, hey, everybody needs to be quiet. We're like, why? He goes, Taliban area. We're like, how do you know? He goes, we just know. So be quiet. And then he'd say, okay, we're past the bad guys now. You can talk as you can. Very surreal. This is the John Deere Gator we brought into country. Sir, remember this?
Yes. Yes.
We actually borrowed 2 John Deere Gators from 10th Mountain Division. These are the 2 ones that we brought on in. And as you can see, we got them covered in MREs, ammunition, batteries, and our rucksacks. And these are 4 members of ODA 595, which are featured in the movie 12 Strong. This is our roll into Mazar-i-Sharif. Once again, what do you not see? No women. What you do see is an exuberant crowd, kind of like the liberation of France, of people coming out to greet us. The best one is this old guy right here, knowing that the Taliban's gone. And then the young kids saluting and things like that. Very surreal moment for us to walk on in. People would just come up and congratulate us and thank us. All right. Only female that we saw, little girl. Walk in, little shoes. That's horse manure all the way around. So think about the 20 years we were in Afghanistan. Once we liberated Afghanistan, this little girl could go to school. She could get a job. She could actually leave her house without a male escort. And then when Afghanistan fell, what happened? Those rights were taken away from her. She could no longer uncover her face. She could no longer go to school. She could no longer have a job. Think about that happening here. Think about the freedoms we wake up to every day. We take them for granted. But this little girl had those freedoms snatched away from her after 20 years. Something to think about. And do we have any Vietnam vets in the room? Sir, I understand how you felt when you saw Saigon fall. I never understood it until this happened to us. The blood, the sweat, and the tears that you saw, we experienced the same thing when Afghanistan fell. Thank you. This is Kwali Jangi. This is the fort where we then ended up. And this is Dawson's old base when he used to run this base when he worked for the Soviets during the occupation. This is basically the end of our mission when we rolled into Kwali Jangi. It's an old 18th century mud fort. These are the freedom fighters we were working with. UAE license plate. Don't know how that got to Afghanistan. But here they are, motivated, thumbs up. This is us moving out to Kunduz to complete the liberation of Kunduz after we rolled up Mazar-e Sharif. And as you can see, everybody's got RPG 7 rounds sticking out of their backpacks. Here's the only one of the few pictures of me actually in Afghanistan validating that I was there, since I took most of the pictures. And this is just us hanging out with our local insurgents. Now, after every SF ODA completed their mission and was given a thumbs up by the Siege of Sodaf in Karshi-Kanibad, we were allowed to bury a piece of the World Trade Center that we were given, that each ODA carried in with us into Afghanistan. This is the piece of World Trade Center steel that we carried in, and we gave that steel full military honors at the Turkish school, at the schoolhouse that was in Mazar-e Sharif, where was our final battle with the Taliban, and that's where we buried this piece of steel. Here's the full military honor funeral that we gave. This is Colonel Mitchell, who won the Distinguished Service Cross for the Battle of Kwali Jangi, and this is Scott Brower, my company commander. This look in their face shows the enormity of what we were doing and what we were doing that day by burying that piece of the World Trade Center and remembering what happened on 9/11. This is the map of all the pieces of the World Trade Center that were buried in Afghanistan by the ODAs and the ODBs when their missions were complete. There's a copy of this picture at the World Trade Center Museum, if any of you want to go see it. And then this is the horse soldier statue that adorns, that overlooks the reflective pools at Ground Zero. Now, a couple things to think about before we go on. Because I took a picture. That picture's led to what? It led to a book. It led to a film. And it led to a statue. From one picture. Usually when SF guys get their pictures taken, there's an Article 15 that soon follows. And like I told General Mulholland, this is the first time we have pictures of SF guys, but there's also not a 15-6. But because of that simple picture, all those things happened, and the world finally knew what Special Forces had done. But you know what wouldn't have happened? None of this would have happened if I simply wouldn't have done this and raised my right hand to serve my country. That one act launched this whole affair. And to close, I did the speech last year on 9/11 at a school, and during the Q&A session, a young lady in the classroom goes, "Why is it important for people like you to come speak to people like us about stuff like this?" And I had an epiphany, which I don't have very often. And I told the young lady, because you can't ask a book a question. Right? So with all the people that you have come through here, what I would like to task all of you to do is ask them the questions you want to answer, because they won't be here forever. And when they're gone, that knowledge, that tribal knowledge, that history goes with them. What's written in a book is good. It's broad strokes. It's battle plans. But the emotional toil, what did you do that day? Where were you that day? Those unique stories last with them, and that's what's lost. So the emotional, personal touch is what's lost when that person's gone. So what I challenge all of you to do is ask those questions. Glean that knowledge from those who went before you. And that concludes my speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got time for about 15 minutes worth of questions. If you have a question, what I'd like you to do is get up and speak into one of the microphones on each of the aisles. Kind of queue up, take your turns, and the Master Sergeant will recognize you, ask your question, one question, not a three-part one, one question, and we'd like to hear what the Master Sergeant has to say.
All right, so be attention about asking questions.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you.
I know it's on, but hey, thank you so much for coming. I want to say the 12 Strong book inspired me to come to VMI and join the military, so thank you so much for coming. I want to ask, sir, in Mazar-e Sharif, when Mike Spence was killed, how did that change your mindset and the operational capability when Mike Spence was killed? How did that change things for you?
Well, I was not there when that happened. I was in Kunduz, right? What that did do, it pissed General Dostum off very, very badly. Because in Afghan war and culture, when you surrender, you don't fight anymore, right? So when they double-crossed us and Mike Spam was killed, they took over Kuala Jangi, that changed the entire mindset of how General Dostum's forces would then interact with the Taliban. They were no longer given pardon or parole for what they have done. They were then searched, they were then bound, and then they were separated so they couldn't sneak grenades in again like they did with Mike Spence. So it really forced them in an evolutionary moment to know that the wars that they've been fighting for the past 1,000 years have now changed. And they had to change their cultural preface to war to a more modern day approach was trust but verify.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, as many of us know how long, grueling, and hard this operation was there any time where you felt hopeless? What did you do to fight that feeling?
We never felt hopeless because when you're in a team, you all draw from each other's strength. The only hopeless part was not showering for 40 days. But when everybody smells, nobody smells, right? So, but when you're in that team, you don't allow yourself to get hopeless, and then you become the weakest link in the team. So as a team, you're stronger together than apart. We're always together.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is, what do you think is the most important lesson you learned with working with Afghan freedom fighters?
It's a great question. Never been asked that. You have to trust them, because if you don't, you can't build rapport. Just like you as officers, if you can't trust your enlisted soldiers, you can't build rapport with them. Same concept. You have to be able to trust, learn and grow with them, because you have to form that bond. And if that bond is not formed, you'll always mistrust. You won't, you understand where I'm getting with, right? So you have to be able to trust to build a bond. And we did that with the Afghans because we had the same common goal of getting rid of ousting the Taliban and returning freedom to the north of Afghanistan.
Thank you, sir.
Certainly.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Rat Parker. Do you remember what the civil affairs did during your mission specifically?
We did not have any civil affairs with us at all. It was strictly SF guys.
Thank you, sir.
Good question. Great foresight. Because they did, once we had pulled out and didn't cover it, they did finally come in, but then we had moved. We were pretty much done, and they were coming in as we moved out. So I wasn't involved in that, so I can't give you a sustained question. But they were involved, and they did a lot of work with winning over the hearts and minds, finding out what the populace wanted and needed.
Good evening, evening, sir. My name is Gabe Thompson. The question I have for you is actually about earlier on in your career, going through selection and becoming Green Beret. Did you have any fear or nerves going into selection and going through? Was there any sort of obstacle or evolution you encountered that stumped you that you kind of had to work through, and how you got through that?
Well, I was motivated pretty well because I was a support guy in the first Special Forces group. And my 6'5" detachment sergeant named Bruce Ring from Brewster, Mass., who talked like he was from Massachusetts, said, if you quit, I'm going to kill you. So had a little bit of motivation right there. And basically, you just suck it up, right? You just put pain over matter and you just continue on. But in Ranger School, we were up on Mount Yonah, it's freezing cold, we're all tired, we walk it all night, and it's about 30 degrees, we're all covered in frost, and my buddy looks at me and goes, dude, if you quit, I will quit. I'm like, I'm not quitting. And you draw your strength from the people around you, and we didn't quit. But you just internalize it, and you don't want to be that weak link. You're there for a reason, right? I mean, I've had shin splints. I'm like, I don't know if I can make this. But I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to quit. Because whenever you quit, you let somebody else down. And then that 12-man team is now an 11-man team carrying the same amount of stuff as a 12-man team.
Thank you, sir. Yep.
Good evening, sir. I understand that as Special Forces, your job is mostly to embed and instruct with the local freedom fighters. Going into Afghanistan for essentially what was the first time, how do you feel that the doctrine of Special Forces adapted to this new environment, a new enemy, and how do you figure that carried on through the conflict of those 20 years?
Great question, because as SF guys, we finally got to do our job for the first time. Because it is train, advise, and assist. We didn't have to train them because they were all ready to train. So it was advise and assist. Our senior leaders advised General Dostum. Our company commanders advised the junior leaders, and we brought in air power. One of the key examples of that was ODA 595 was helping General Dawson's forces conduct an attack. Well, there's a tank. Horses don't do well against tanks. So we're like, look, we've got a B-52 overhead. We're going to call some bombs in, and we're going to drop them on the tank. Once it lands on the tank, then your horses can come through, right? He goes, good? He goes, yes, good. So the bombs are now in the air. He goes, hey, we just dropped the bombs. So the guy takes that communications problem, and the horses are now running towards the tank while the bomb is in the air. So ODA 595 is like, they're going to kill everybody. Luckily, the bomb hit, took out the tank, horses ran through the tank, took out the bad guys, and they came back and said, best attack ever. But yes, we finally got to do our job in that pure, soft thing that we trained for in Robin Sage, but we never got to do in the real world until that. Then as it evolved, we started building long-term relationships with our partner forces, and we would go back and see them, and they would remember us building that long-term bond.
Sir, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Good evening, sir. My name is Anish Shin. What's a piece of advice for those that are in the room that want to commission and be junior officers one day?
Well, when you show up to your new units, listen. The knowledge is there. Embark your knowledge that you've learned here, bring that with you, and then taking what you're learning from the unit that you're there. Listen to your NCOs and work with your NCOs. You two are a team. You are an inseparable team. The best teams that I've seen that command and control well are officers and their NCOs who speak as one, because they both know each other's minds, they can anticipate each other, and they are a well-oiled team. And when you see that, it's a beautiful thing. And I'm sure some of my enlisted guys here can validate that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir. My name is William Stackpool. I was wondering if the Afghan freedom fighters had any military structure such as companies or battalions.
Nothing doctrinally on paper. It was basically just groups. You're in Atta's group, you're in Dasta's group, and basically it's more of a tribal structure as opposed to a, it was tribal because you had your tribal Uzbeks, your Pashto, your Afghans, so it was like a mixed bag.
Thank you, sir.
You work with what you get.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir. My name's Ryan Gekted. Obviously, as like a Green Beret, you work with other peoples. different cultures. What were some like language and cultural barriers or obstacles that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Well, the language barrier for, so most of us spoke a smattering of Arabic, but most of them spoke Russian, right? We had a few Russian speakers, but not to the depth of speaking to what we did use. Luckily, we had an interpreter named Lakai, so we were able to do that. Luckily, we knew the culture well enough. We knew the do's and don'ts, right? So when they brought in female family members who'd been hurt, the medics would put up walls, people couldn't see anything. We worked through the difficulties of that to accommodate them, right? Because the key thing is you don't want to offend them because you lose the rapport that you built. Because the rapport you build today, the rapport you lose today, you sometimes can't rebuild tomorrow. So you just work within those confines and do the best you can.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. I just want to ask, after looking back at the 20-year involvement in Afghanistan, is there anything that you or U.S. Armed Forces at large should have done differently?
We shouldn't have shifted our focus from Afghanistan to Iraq within 6 months. And that's where I think things went wrong, and we should have been there to solve it and not pull out and see it collapse. It's like building a house of cards and watching it collapse in front of you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir. Just thank you for your service. And
Thank you for letting me volunteer.
yes, sir. Along with his question, as we left Afghanistan, what advice do you have for our generation? It was kind of hurtful to see that, and I can't imagine what you guys went through. So, what advice do you have for us so that never happens again?
Don't fight any more wars. And that's the one way to prevent it.
Yeah.
But if you're going to commit to an ally and befriend them, be faithful.
Yes, sir.
We do that in our relationships now, right? All the friends that you're going to make here in VMI, be faithful to them till the end. They'll be your closest brotherhood and sisterhood that you'll have for the rest of your lives. I still talk to guys that I went through basic training with. And the one thing you will find, you may not talk for 20 years, but you'll pick up that phone and you'll pick up with that last conversation you had 20 years ago as if it was yesterday. That is the bond that you will carry and you will share with your fellow comrades for the rest of your lives.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. My name is Thomas Gannon. Thank you for your speech tonight, and furthermore, thank you for your service. My question to you is, what guidance would you give to the future civilian and military leaders in this room who are entrusted with the continued sovereignty of our nation as we find ourselves in one of the most turbulent geopolitical arenas of our century?
Well, since I'm not in Congress and I don't dictate, I don't really have any guidance. But what I would hope would be done, we think twice before we send American treasure onto the battlefield. And we work together as a team as opposed to two twittering street gangs on the same block. Is that good?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Last two questions over here.
Good evening. Good evening, sir. What would you say is your biggest takeaway from this experience, or the most valuable thing to come out of being a part of this team?
In Afghanistan, or being an SF, or speaking with all of you folks here?
Whichever you find the most compelling.
Very good. Question's back on me. I think doing what I'm doing right now is just bringing living history to a group of people who weren't even born when it happened. It's you're carrying something that needs to be, it's like the Olympic torch that's been passed on to the days of Greece. People with living history are passing that on to the next generation so that flame never goes out.
Thank you.
Hey, great question. Got me thinking for a second.
Hi, good evening. I'm a VMI parent, and thank you so much for being here and for your service. And I'm one of those over 35 who was, I have a question, but if you'll forgive me a quick anecdote. I was living in Manhattan that day and living on the Upper East Side, working in a hospital. I could smell the smoke in my bedroom. And it is so impossible to understand and imagine how the tone and the sentiment of an entire city of so many people could have shifted in an instant. We cleared out ERs and entire wings of the hospital to receive, every hospital in Manhattan to receive bodies, and there were none because there were not survivors. And one of the things that struck me later, and I, to this day, don't even know why I don't know this story more, but this did change our nation, and it was a shock point, and it was like Kennedy's assassination. But there had actually been a detonation in, I think it was the parking area of the World Trade Centers a few years before. And we didn't pick up that cue. We didn't read that moment. And so my question to you is, in the vein of what a lot of people have asked already, is over the years reflecting back on that experience, have you had moments from your career, from your life experience, where you felt that hot button again? How can these young people predict and sense when there's so much chaos in the world, when there's so much turbulence? Sort of like, oh, wait a second, this is a big one. Something is cooking. How do we read it?
Right, well,
better. How do we choose?
Americans are very good at putting their heads back in the sand, right? We're very good at that, and we have an ocean that separates us, so we're an island unto ourselves, and we sometimes miss those things, right? But yeah, I mean, we should remain vigilant and look for those threats, because we don't want to be sucker punched again, right? And all we can do is hopefully that the people that we elect and the people who want to put charge take those same values and look at that same tenet of responsibility of keeping the nation safe as a whole.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for sharing that.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give National